And I am also going to do auto transcription. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad you could join us this morning, as always. I hope you all had a good weekend and hopefully enjoying a little more cooler weather, although it's been rather cold in many cases, but it's certainly been nice to cool down a little bit. So to get started with, as we always do, I want to thank our sponsors, CareFirst Air Health Plan, the Satellite Broadcasters Association, Valley of the Sun United Way, and Khajiit. And today I want to welcome, Rory, are you on the call? Didn't get a chance to look at the list here. Rory, are you on the call this morning? Anybody from Triad online? Well, anyway, I want to welcome our new sponsor, Triad Wireless. Rory Conaway has been participating some in the task force and stepped up to be a sponsor, and looking for others who are participating in the task force to join us. So moving on, is there anybody new to our task force today who hasn't participated in any calls previously? Going once, going twice? Okay, if not, moving on. Just a reminder that the meeting schedule, February 7, 14, 28, no meeting on February 21st, which is President's Day. I just wanted to remind you about that. And let's see. So again, as always, I try to remind you, if you haven't done so, to please fill out our Google form so that we have your contact information. Really want to keep a good track of who's participating in the task force. So I please ask that you do that. Next thing, as you probably all know, is that after this meeting, we do our kibitzing with colleagues, which is basically an informal, we stop sharing, we stop, no presentations, just opportunity for people to share, ask questions, get input, and so forth. So I encourage you all, if you have the time, to stay online. That may be 10 minutes, it may be an hour, depending on how people are participating. So I encourage you all to participate in that. Next thing is, you all should have gotten an email from me that we are meeting. Leah, are you online yet? Okay, I don't think Leah's here yet. But anyway, on February 1st, which is tomorrow at 3:30, we are meeting with Chairperson Leah Marquez Peterson regarding potential changes to the Arizona Universal Service Fund. They have opened a docket, and Leah has asked that she would like to have input from this group about suggestions of how we might make changes to that fund. And in my conversations with Leah, there were several questions that came to mind. One is, should we continue the Universal Service Fund? And if so, how should that money be used? Who should manage it? Should that money go through the Corporation Commission? Should it go through ACA or other? And so there's a lot of questions as we continue to move ahead and have discussions about that fund. So that meeting will be tomorrow, again, February 1st, 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. And you'll get a more background about that fund, how the money is being collected, how the money is being used today. But that money, there was funding that was available that we used for our education fund to match E-rate funding that provided a significant amount of money here in the state. And you'll hear about that also at the meeting tomorrow. So if you can make it, I hope you'll all join. You should have gotten an email from me. So moving on, anything else? Mark, you have an announcement of an event coming up?
Sure, thanks, Steve. I am moderating a panel at ASU Law School. It's a hybrid event, Thursday at noon. It's a free event, and it's on the hot sectors in Arizona for consideration. I have Joan Kerber Walker, who chairs the bio industry, Dominic Pappas, who recently moved from Commerce, where he headed smart city stuff, to AWS. He's kind of a cloud guru now for them. Just some of you may not have caught that transition quite yet. And someone on blockchain and fintech, and Greg Head on software as a service and software development. So it's an hour-long panel. I'm going to put a link and the flyer in the post. Thank you.
And you should also have that link in the email announcement about this meeting today. So, and actually, I would like to remind you that we do have our, although it needs to be updated some, but we do have our webpage that has a lot of information about funding sources, resources, and so forth. And so I encourage you to check that out. And then also, you may have noticed that, although it's getting a little long, that I've started to include key and timely announcements in the meeting announcement. So I encourage you to pay attention to that. Some things are immediate, some things are more long-term, but I encourage you to check out those announcements. And then I don't think Tim has been joining us. Tim Carter with the Yavapai County School Superintendent has been looking for a broadband coordinator. Anybody know if he actually found somebody yet? Apparently not.
I don't think so, not yet. Well, that would be a plum opportunity.
Yeah.
Tim Carter's office would be a wonderful place to work.
Yeah. And then I also want to again remind you, time is coming up pretty quickly here, but Cindy, do you want to do another begging, please?
That's attractive. Yeah, I'm Cindy Hogan. I work with, I'm an AmeriCorps member. I work with Liberty Connects at this time, and I'm going to the Digital Inclusion Alliance, National Digital Inclusion Alliance conference in February, and I'm looking for sponsorship for that event to just cover my expenses. I get a stipend from AmeriCorps, but and Janet has offered her some support, and I'm just looking for little bits and pieces, whatever I can get. So I'll put my information in the chat.
Great, thanks. And Cindy, as you all probably know, Cindy has been a tireless worker and probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the state about digital inclusion, and doing a hell of a lot of work down here in Tucson and Pima with the Pima County plan that Michelle mentioned earlier, and with this task force. So we really try to encourage you all to support her. Okay. With that, let's jump into our updates. Jeff, you want to kick it off, please?
Thanks, Steve. A couple big ones. Our grants closing. We're very excited. What I have seen, it will be incredibly oversubscribed. A lot of projects, a lot of good projects. But as I remind everyone I talked to about this grant, is that this is one of several that we're going to see this year. There's quite a bit of money coming from the IIJA funds. And we intend to continue this process. We had great luck with the first grant. I'm sure we're going to have some great projects here. I haven't been able to talk to anybody about the grant applications for a little while now, so I'm a little bit in the dark on what we're going to see in total and specifically, but very, very excited about this project. The key is to get to work quickly as commodity prices and labor prices are rising. We want to get this work done and get our folks served. Next up, we're going to be releasing our state broadband middle mile plan later this week. Look for that probably on Thursday, possibly Wednesday. The governor's comms team is communicating a lot of this, so I'm on for the ride for that. It will give you a pretty good idea of what we're looking at in terms of highways, where the opportunities are and what we'd like to do. And I'm hopefully 100% healed and back. So please get a hold of me. These next couple of weeks are going to be a little nutty with the grant applications and the evaluation. So if I don't get back to you immediately, I'm going to apologize in advance. But this is an exciting time, and we're excited to evaluate and get that money out to the folks who will do the good work. So thank you.
So Jeff, a couple of things. Do you have any sense about whether or not you're going to be oversubscribed in requests for funds?
Yes, absolutely. I expect it to be seriously. To give you some perspective, at the national level, NTIA had a $288 million grant that we're in the running for a project up in Heber Overgaard. And I believe Apache County is still in the running for that project. They got over $2 billion in applicants. So I expect us to be seriously oversubscribed. And as I've told everyone, no one's going to get what they want. They're going to hopefully get what they need. And we're going to get to work on this.
Cool. And then what's the latest on getting you some help?
Interviews are starting. We're excited. I've been given clearance to get a little more help than I had expected. So that's a good thing. So if you do have any contacts or friends that you feel would be a great applicant for our assistant broadband director job, please do have them go ahead and apply. I believe it's on ZipRecruiter and Indeed, if I remember correctly.
So Jeff, do you want to tell people quickly about what that job primarily is going to be focused on?
We're looking at a couple different things. We're looking for more than one. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on. We need technical help. We need folks that can take a look and evaluate not just grant applications, but projects. We have some major projects going on our highways, and hopefully that will continue. We're also looking for somebody who's an expert on federal and state grants. As you can imagine, all this money coming in, the compliance side of this is very, very strict. Somebody who has the attention to detail and experience dealing with the grants, not only our compliance with the feds, but working with the grant recipients here in Arizona to make sure that they're in compliance. The ARPA funds, there's quite a bit of language around what we can do and can't do. The IIJA is still going through the process of being done. So that's important. We're also looking, as we really take a deep dive into digital inclusion in the next year, somebody who has some background in that, which I think is incredibly important. That is certainly not my forte, but I'm learning every day. I learn a lot from folks like Cindy and the team at the State Library. But we need somebody who can interface on that level and help us. We have quite a bit of money. We have $100 million just for digital equity coming from the federal government. And we're going to need someone to help manage that process. So that's a very diverse list of skills, but my expectation is we're going to wind up with 2 to 3 people with that skill set spread out across those 3.
So you're looking at, Jeff, of having somebody specifically with digital inclusion that may not be the same as that assistant manager. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so is that official now that you guys, which we sort of expected, is that ACA will take the lead in the digital inclusion grant and planning?
Yeah. There's still a lot of work to be done. Obviously work with Derek and Lev and the team at Sun Corridor, but we're running with that as we speak, and making sure at this point just that we get our paperwork in. But that's an exciting project, and we're definitely looking for good ideas. I know I've had a chance to talk to Cindy and others, and I just want to make sure that this money is spent in a really productive way. And I think that we have the folks in the circle here to do that. Arizona is a very unique state in that we do have a very rural area in addition to some very large cities. What is Phoenix, the 5th largest city in the country right now? So finding that balance is going to be a key, and having somebody who understands both the needs of rural and urban, as well as our tribal areas. I mean, gosh, we've spent a lot of time with our tribes, and there are some unique challenges. But I will tell you that there's not a more motivated group than our tribal nations.
Okay. So Jeff, as you and I have discussed that with the task force, we're going to try and convene some folks to begin some discussion about that state plan with, but want to make it clear, it's not our intent that the task force would be responsible for developing that plan, that certainly it would be under you. And of course collaboratively, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm hoping that we'll still be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. One idea that NTIA has done a really good job with throughout this process is they hold listening sessions. And once we get some folks on board, I'd love to partner with the AZPSN to possibly have 1 or 2 listening sessions around the state to help understand the need and some of our options.
Good. Sounds like a plan. I'll be in touch with you about how do we get that coordinated and so forth.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jeff? Okay, moving on to the State Library. Mala, are you online?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. So Mala, Holly, Nicole, any or all of you have some updates for us, please?
I'll start. I don't have too much to report this week, but on January 27th, SCC announced that it has adopted the report and order updating the E-rate program rules, and to clarify that tribal libraries can access the funding to provide internet access to their communities. What is different in this as compared to what we currently have is that currently tribal libraries have to apply to the state library, their state library, to see if they are eligible and if they meet the criteria. Different state libraries have different criteria. For us, it is that they should be eligible for the LSTA grants that is given to us by IMLS. We have slight modifications for that for the tribal libraries, in that we were recognizing them if they had a web presence, if they could indicate their open hours to the public, and if they had trained staff that would help them help customers who approach them. We also wanted them to have some kind of collection, either e-collection or that's electronic collection, or a physical collection. But now they don't have to apply to us. They can directly apply for E-rate, and the criteria that USAC asks is that they have a list of criteria that are uniformly applied across the country for all tribal libraries, and they would like them to comply with that. I will put that in my notes, so I don't want to take up the time here to talk about what those criteria are, etc. And I'll put the order and report. It is multiple pages, but I will put it and summarize it for you in the report. So this actually did away with the conflict that some of the tribal libraries had as a sovereign nation. They didn't want to ask the state library to approve their eligibility, and hence didn't apply. There were less than 30% of the tribal libraries around in the whole country that were applying for E-rate. So this is a step in the right direction. I will put the SCC's news release in my report, and you will see that there are statements from Chairwoman Rosenwasser as well as from the Commissioners Carr and Stark. They've all issued statements as to why they think this is a great idea, and they expect more applications from the state library. There's also a state from the tribal library, sorry. They are also going to do a massive outreach to the tribal libraries. They have funding to do that from SCC, and they are starting with promotion very, very quickly because they are eligible to apply even for this grant cycle, for 22-23 grant cycle for E-rate. Other than that, I don't have anything else to report. We didn't have any new E-rate release, E-rate funding release. It's just the same as the funding commitment of last week. That's $103 million that has been committed to Arizona so far. Back to you, Steve, unless anyone has any questions, and if Holly wants to add anything about the eligibility for the tribal libraries, more than what I mentioned, welcome to do so.
I didn't see Holly. Holly, are you online?
I am.
And-
I don't have anything to add. I think Mala covered everything. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Nicole, are you online?
No, she isn't.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Didn't see her. Okay, moving on, and I didn't see Janet. Janet, are you online? Janet Major?
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Oh.
Steve.
Oh, yeah, I did see you actually. Go ahead.
I do have a couple of things that I wanted to report. We have put together a search committee to replace our director. Meanwhile, I did an e-introduction to Mike and Mark and Arizona Tech Council. We do have on our team a new person that we're very excited to have on our team, Tara Sklar from the University of Arizona College of Law. She's based in Washington, D.C., and she will be not only an advocate and person who helps us with telehealth law in Arizona, but also nationally. So look for that, Mark and Mike and anybody else. I'd be happy to introduce you. I also wanted to share in the chat, the FCC released the awards for round 2 for the COVID-19 telehealth grants. And we're very fortunate here in Arizona. There are 6 communities, well, 5 communities that jumped out at me just at first glance: Payson, Globe, Prescott, Page, and Colorado City. And it's interesting that there are community health centers. There are a lot of people in a lot of great places that are going to be getting help from that award. So we're very lucky that Arizona was well represented. I will also share, I shared a flyer regarding the Arizona or Rural Health Public Health Policy Forum tomorrow. Both Jeff and Leah Marquez Peterson will be on a broadband panel, and the registration link is there. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is the grant writing series that we've put together. I worked with Learn, Design, Apply, Inc., who Jeff and I have worked with before. Their major area of expertise are the DLT grants, but they're grant experts no matter what kind of grant you're writing. Since our telehealth resource center serves the 5 Western states, I've put together the series so that for the months of February, March, and April, the second Tuesday will be a grant workshop. In Tuesday, February 8th, we'll kick off the series, and everyone is welcome. We will be focusing on that Western region, but we'll be introducing the experts and give an overview of grants and hot grant writing tips, which is great whether you're writing a foundation grant or a state grant or a federal grant. On Tuesday, March 8th, we'll be dedicating the program to the URSW, the DLT grants for anybody who's interested. And then in April, I would like to dedicate that and partner with AZBSN and ACA to focus in April on Arizona. Certainly we'll be sharing the Arizona resources at the first kickoff, but I would like to have a presentation that would focus just specifically on the state of Arizona. So I'm looking forward to having some help with that. And that would be on Tuesday, April 12th. On the second Thursdays then, following the Tuesday presentations, we'll be hosting a virtual office hours. So people who would like help with their grants, people have questions about specific grants that they're writing. So the format will be really great so that we'll be sharing a lot of information and providing a lot of resource support for people who are writing grants. And it'll be great to have the support of folks who are here to also be providing some great resources.
Any
Steve, I'll
questions?
just add that we're hoping to have some of the rulemaking done on the IIJA funding by the April seminar, so we can speak to that. I know that there are a lot of communities. I had a great call with the mayor of Flagstaff last week and the team up there that are looking at infrastructure funds for broadband and other things. So a lot more to come. A lot of this depends on how quickly our federal partners can get those rules out. But this is an exciting year. And if you're not applying for these funds because you feel like you don't have the in-house talent or the ability to do it, definitely talk to Janet. And she's done a great job of helping, coach folks up so they can go out and get this money. There's probably a third that is competitive, and we're really going to be after people to get their applications in for that money.
Thanks, Jeff.
So a couple of things. The information about many of the events that Janet talked about is in the email announcement about this meeting. I've been trying to, as I mentioned, to list a lot of key things that are happening, and particularly those that are coming up with deadlines. So I encourage you all to check that out and find the links and join in those efforts. So Janet, I know you've had your celebration of your former director, who I know you missed dearly. So those interviews are going on now for replacement.
The interviews for the selection committee.
Okay.
But the dean is motivated. He swears we're going to be on board in 90 days, and he's counting. Every time we talk to him, he tells us how many days are left. So we've made some great suggestions for folks that we would like to see on that national search committee, and I'm looking forward to seeing the applications come in.
Okay.
And the really great news about that is it means that we still have the opportunity to be a center of excellence as opposed to being consumed by another department. So we're very fortunate that we are an established center of excellence. We're a program that's 25 years old, and telehealth is such a hot thing that we're going to get some incredible applications.
Cool. Well, you are like one of the top, if not the top, telemedicine program in the country.
In the world.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Any questions for Janet? Okay, if not, Arizona Department of Education, Sophia, Mylan, Kelly, anybody got anything they want to share with us, please?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Good morning. I was in the car earlier. I think you tried to say hi to me, Steve, but I could not drive and unmute and do all of the things.
No problem.
So I apologize. Sophia had to leave early for another meeting, and she said she didn't have any updates. And I don't either, but I can tell you as far as my office, the Office of Digital Teaching and Learning, we are going through all of the data. We're starting to make presentations internally to the Department of Education. So hopefully by the end of this month, we will have data and strategy that we can publish. So we're starting to do those presentations this week, which is really exciting. And we're starting to put a strategy and action into place as far as what we can do. And so, like I said, hopefully toward the end of this month, we'll be able to share that.
Okay, great. So
Steve,
yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I posted something relevant to ADE in the chat. Chris Richardson, after 6 months as temporary CIO, is back at ASU. So he posted an interesting blog about that experience, about what he learned at ADE, about them and how and what he helped doing there, and what he's bringing back to ASU from that. So that's a blog post on the ASU UTO site, and also the new ADE CIO. I think the names have been mentioned here before. Elizabeth Neely is on board. I don't have her email, but I posted her LinkedIn profile.
Thank you, Mark, for doing that. Yeah, Chris he posted a blog, I think it was last week. I learned a new word from that blog called secondment. I had not ever heard that term before, but that's essentially what Chris did when he left ASU and came here temporarily in that appointment. And now he is back and we have Beth. So lots of changes, but all very exciting and good. And Chris has been a fantastic ambassador for this office. Thank you, Mark, again for posting that.
So Kelly, we should probably connect with Chris and maybe invite her to participate with us.
With Beth, yes.
Or Beth, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, I know that, she is just, diving in head first and is, up in over her head. Yes, absolutely. But I can share this with her as well and see if we can arrange that.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks.
And Mylan, I don't think you're online, are you? Okay, moving on. And Leah, are you online? Don't think so. So again, just a reminder that meeting is tomorrow, and encourage you all to participate. I guess I want to make a disclaimer about that meeting, is that at that meeting, we may and probably will not come up necessarily with a consensus and our recommendation from this task force. It kind of depends. We haven't really had a process for doing that. But we are looking for ideas, input, and suggestions about that fund. So I encourage you all to participate, learn more about that fund, and provide your input. So any questions about that before we move on? Okay, Derek, I didn't see you online. Are you here? Okay, but Wes Brownfield, you are or were online. Are you still there?
Last man standing.
So you want to give us latest on what's happening with the Final Mile project?
Well, the latest is we're turning dirt on 5 projects. Actually, we're turning dirt on 3 projects because we have one hung up in the towers hung up in the supply chain. So we got 5 projects in progress. Actually, Paloma, one of that 5, they're live and running. And we have RFPs for 5 more. And then we're out of money.
I was just going to ask you whether you had enough money. You only had $1.5 million from ADE. What other funds have you had?
Nothing yet. I've been asking hat in hand. We're hopefully when we get the next 5 started and we get to the point where we have 5 completed and another 5 in advanced stage of progress, that'll be a big enough proof of concept that and an example of what you can do with $1.5 million, that success will attract benefactors.
So Wes, I would suggest to you that you might want to contact, and I know I've talked about this before, but the Rural Economic Recovery Center.
Yes, you did.
And the grants, and that they may be able to help you with planning, with consultants, and helping you to find some funding. So I don't know if she hasn't been online recently, but she has been participating, and they're very supportive of the work we're doing.
Give me the name again, because I'll forget it if I don't.
I'll have to send it to you, Wes.
Of the group.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the Arizona Rural Economic Development Center, I believe it's
Okay.
Hey, Wes, this is Jeff. Quick question. I probably knew this, but I forgot. How is the Final Mile project organized? Is it a nonprofit, and is there a board of directors, and how does that work?
Yes, we have a board of directors that was, we had the help of Tim Carter establishing the board of directors, and Sean Rickert, the superintendent out at Pima Unified, is the chairman. Glenn Lineberry up at Miami is the vice chair.
Yeah, I definitely know a couple of those gentlemen. Good group. So you're not wholly owned by the school districts or ADE
No.
or any other. Okay, perfect.
No, we're not. We're separate. They won't have anything to do with us until we prove this concept.
Perfect.
So have they actually created, I think the last time I talked with you, Wes, was some time ago, is that that you didn't have an actual separate entity. Is that now changed, that there's actually like a 501c3 and a board, or not?
Not yet. I mean, the only board we have is the board of directors for the consortium. The problem is that we've all been so busy, and it was a group of work just getting it to this point, that there are some decisions like that we need to make as a board. But try to get 5 superintendents together for 30 minutes sometime during the week.
Yeah.
And let me know how you did it. You know, Jeff, it's interesting. We want to succeed, but we don't want to become victims of our own success. And especially during the legislative season, I'm so busy, and Sean is so busy, and Glenn is so busy dealing with what happens at the legislature. Sometimes the obvious next move is just beyond us. And that's one reason we haven't chased grant money. There is nobody on our board who has the time to do that effectively. But this rural economic development outfit, now that sounds hopeful. Because it's, we probably don't have the capacity to do grants, but boy, if I knew somebody who had, I'd work that angle really hard.
Well,
Wes, I'd like to introduce you to the folks from Local First. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I know
group.
them.
Okay, they actually have grant writers that they'll loan to y'all. And I
Oh,
spoke at their conference last year. Really, they're very involved with ACA. They understand the ACA processes very well as the federal and state. So my recommendation is to talk to Kimber and the folks over there.
yeah, I know Kimber. I'll talk to Kimber. And I know somebody on her staff whose name escapes me right now. That's why I write
Katie
everything
Boyd.
down. I'm sorry?
Katie Boy is over that because I used them. She was on the call, I think, a couple of times, probably
Katie
maybe a month ago.
Boyd?
Katie
Odie.
with
I'll
Bodie.
send,
that's
I'll
right,
send
yeah.
you her contact information, Wes.
Please
But,
do.
but as Jeff indicated, that they do provide consultants, they do provide funding, and they do provide assistance to help people write grants for exactly the reason that you talked about, is that a lot of folks don't have either the time or the expertise to do that. And that's really what they're there for, is to help communities and organizations find funding and write grants. So you definitely should be following up with them.
I will certainly do that. Thank you. This is worth the dime to join you guys today.
Yeah. And actually, I've been meaning to contact Tim because he may actually want to consider just hiring a consultant rather than a staff person. And as you know, which Mark has done a great job of putting together a directory of consultants. And that's how many of the communities have been able to get their grants and do their planning. So just something to think about.
If I were you, I'd contact Tim pretty soon before he goes too far along the interviewing and hiring process.
Yeah, I will. I meant to do that a couple of weeks ago, so I will try to do that.
Yeah, if you do it today. Don't do it tomorrow. If it's not today, do it Wednesday or later, because he's going to be down for the legislature testifying tomorrow.
Okay,
He'll be
I'll try.
pretty busy.
I'll try and get him later today. Any questions or comments for Wes before we move on?
I just want to thank everybody for letting me sit at the big kids table, even though some Mondays I don't show up.
We're always glad to have you, Wes. So Cindy, do you want to give us an update on what's happening with the digital inclusion network that we're working on?
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, the Digital Inclusion Network is kind of a smaller group of digital inclusion practitioners. We're going to have a meeting this week for practitioners on February 3rd to discuss the Affordable Connectivity Program. And if anyone would like to attend, they can email me and I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay. And do we have anything more about the seniors project that's been going on down here in Tucson?
No, where the group is kind of reorganizing to develop some specific things that we want to strive toward and work toward. And so, yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other announcements before we move on to our presentation for today? Going once, going twice. If not,
Yeah. Hey, I've got a quick one. And Sharika, I'm going to ask Sharika to expand on this, but I don't know if any of you saw in the inclusion space, Dell and Intel just launched a big thing at Chandler Unified School District, gave away 4,000 laptops. I don't know if anybody saw that.
did not.
I did. I saw that. That was it's a device as a service pilot project. This is John Kelly with Travigates, and it's a high school with significant free and reduced lunch population, And I know that the devices have attached services to it. And it's one of the things that our Education Task Force long-term plan group was thinking that the state should think about for a lot of districts, facilitating that kind of an acquisition project. So I'm pretty excited. I posted that on LinkedIn a couple days ago, and I post things every once in a while on LinkedIn. I usually get 200 or 300 hits, and within about 48 hours, I got over 700 hits on that, which I thought was an interesting measurement.
Great. And John, just FYI that I have been talking with folks at Microsoft. We're working on some collaboration, and you and I probably should talk since I know you're well connected with them.
Sounds great. And Intel as well.
Yeah. I haven't had any contact with Intel, so maybe you can help with that.
We'll try.
Okay. So anyway, let's move on to our presentation for today. And, I gotta say to Elena that I cannot believe that with all this time that we have not had Common Sense Media do a presentation for us. They've been an active participant and supporter of the task force for a long, long time. And so I'm really pleased to be able to hear from Common Sense Media, Amina, who is the Senior Director for Equity Policy, Elena Lowry, who's the Arizona Director for Common Sense. And I think you're going to be pretty amazed to find out some of the stuff that they're actually engaged with here in Arizona and nationally. And Drew, I don't know if you're online or not, but Drew Garner, who's been participating pretty regularly in the task force, is a state broadband policy fellow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elena and Amina, and you guys are on, and I will stop sharing, and you're welcome to share.
Well, thank you, Steve. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Yeah, I was kind of surprised too that after all this time we hadn't really presented, but to be honest, I think the presentation we're going to do today is much more aligned with this group as opposed to sort of a high-level overview of who Common Sense is. But I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to run through a little bit about who we are, just for those of you that don't know. But it's really going to be important for me to share, for Amina and for Drew to share the information that is sort of midway through the presentation. So I might go a little quick, but here we go. Let's make sure we're sharing the right screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So hold on one second. Move you guys over here. Okay. So you pretty much know me, so I'm not going to bother with that. But this is who we are. We're a trusted guide for families, educators, and advocates who help kids thrive, particularly in the digital age. We provide resources to harness the power of media and technology and to shape public policy to improve the well-being of every child. So we do this in three ways. We have three pillars: Common Sense Media, Common Sense Education, and Common Sense Kids Action. So we like to say we rate, educate, and advocate for kids, families, and schools. And this is how we do it. We have a very powerful platform, and we leverage our reach and our impact to drive systemic change. And so you can see the numbers. This is national. I can certainly share some of the local numbers with all of you if you're interested. But Common Sense Media has over 108 million users. Common Sense Education, we're in well more than 60,000 schools across the country with our digital citizenship curriculum. We advocate in all 50 states. And our research has seen more than 3.5 billion impressions since we actually started in, we're based in San Francisco, and we actually started, the organization launched in 2000 and, Amina, help me, 2008, something like that.
I think that's right. It's a little over 15 years old.
Yeah, I think we're actually closer to 18. So yeah. So I already talked about this. The digital citizenship and teaching resources, that is free. All of the resources that we have are free to both educators, students, families that are learning through technology. We want to empower kids with the skills that they need to compete in the global economy. So all we do is based on that. And then very quickly, Common Sense Media, we rate all media for kids. So some of you who have children might be aware of the ratings and reviews that we have for movies and books and video games and everything like that. We recently moved over, or not moved over, but we recently started reviews, and we have a rubric for race and representation now. And we have a lot of our information, almost all of our information is in Spanish as well. And it's all grounded in the research that we do. So again, we offer parenting advice, and then we have a new team, family and community engagement. So we partner with school districts and community-based organizations to reach low-income Black and Latino families with relevant content for kids and families. And then I mentioned the curriculum, so I will kind of skip that, but it is K through 12. It is free, and we have customizable presentations for every grade band, every different topic that you can think of. And then next we have advocacy. So that's what we're working on very, very hard now in Arizona, is we're really working to promote tech equity, to close the digital divide, to ensure digital inclusion. So this is really the area that we want to talk to you about today. Of course, we want to protect privacy for kids, families, and consumers. We want to ensure competition and choices. We want to ensure that big tech companies, platforms are being responsible. And then, of course, we want to promote tech innovation in a number of different areas. So I just wanted you to get an idea. For those of you that may be familiar with us, you may have seen stories or have seen our research promoted and talked about on any one of these, in any one of these outlets. So when we started in Arizona in early 2019, we knew that we were going to do these 4 things. And the first one was to raise awareness about the impact of media and tech on kids. We wanted to empower young people to use technology safely and responsibly, and we wanted to support their digital well-being. We moved into building families and educators, knowledge, skills, and confidence in harnessing technology as a positive force for kids. And now, as I said, champion federal and statewide policies to close the digital divide. And then shout out to Tracy and some of the other groups that we've worked with over the last few years. So Common Sense Kids Action is our advocacy arm. We really want to make kids our top priority across the country. So some of the things that we are working really hard on, in addition to positive media technology, is early childhood for all. So high quality early childhood for all, 21st century learning, and then continued support for families, and however, in whatever way that looks like. It could be supporting extension of the child tax credit or any of the other federal benefits and things that are coming down the pike for families and kids. So I know that was really quick, but I do want to introduce you to Amina Fezlullah, who is our Senior Director of Equity Policy. And then Drew Gardner is our State Broadband Policy Fellow, and he'll follow up with Amina. So Amina, I know you're on. If you want to go ahead, I will jump right in and you can take it from there.
All right, and I'll just say next slide when I'm ready.
So, Amina, before we move on, and maybe you're going to touch on this, but you have a pretty significant chairperson for your organization. Maybe you want to talk about.
He's actually the founder and CEO, Jim Steyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he is the founder and now serves as CEO of Common Sense. And he actually was just on a panel with the ASU Smart Region Summit that was, I think, in mid-January. And so, yeah, so he is actually behind all of the work that we're doing in terms of his passion and his concepts and his big ideas. So yeah, so thanks for that, Steve.
Sure. And now, Mina, you're on, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on some of the advocacy work that we've been doing at the federal level. And just a little bit of introduction. My background is in digital divide and tech policy. Prior to joining Common Sense, I was a Mozilla Tech Policy Fellow, and I focused on connectivity for rural, tribal, and refugee communities domestically and internationally. You know, a lot of the work that I've been doing for Common Sense, especially since the start of the pandemic, has really been focused in on connectivity for the K-12 digital divide. And what we learned at the very start of the pandemic was that we had really loose definitions and loose understandings of what the, some people call it the homework gap, what the K-12 digital divide looked like. There was like a general understanding of the digital divide, but there weren't a lot of specifics. And what we got in feedback from policymakers at the federal level, especially, and at the state level, honestly, was, you know, just sort of this sort of wide-eyed asking us, what exactly does that mean? What do we need to pay for? What do the programs need to look like? And for those of us who've been working on the digital divide for many years, I don't know, it's a little bit of frustration because, you know, this isn't new. It didn't just appear with the pandemic, but certainly I think it opened the eyes of many policymakers. So we put together research to try to drill down on it. And, you know, prior to the pandemic, we found that a lot of the efforts to close the digital divide, especially when it came to the homework gap, the K-12 digital divide, you know, relied on outside supports. And it seemed sort of acceptable to sort of send a kid or student out into a library parking lot after hours, or to sit at Starbucks or McDonald's or wherever and cobble together connectivity. And even in 2019, we did a report where we saw that the presence of the digital divide at home was distorting how teachers were, you know, in students' home, were distorting how teachers were actually assigning homework. So you could have a great, well-connected school, you could have one-to-one devices, you could have teacher training, everything could be great in the school. But when teachers knew that those devices would go dark when the kids went home, they wouldn't assign homework that required any kind of use of technology. And so we're starting to pull back despite the fact that all of these resources had been available in some schools. And so we understood that, you know, really to truly close the K-12 digital divide, you had to go outside of the school walls and make sure that families were connected. But what did that actually include? So next slide. Well, part of the reason to do this, I think that was pushing a lot of thinking around the pandemic, was this sort of concern about learning loss, and that having no access to school would be certainly accelerating learning loss and creating huge gaps. What we know now is that, you know, obviously everybody wants to have their students in school as much as possible. But next slide, we also understand that, you know, technology is an important tool for education, regardless of what's going on in terms of the outside atmosphere. And so it's really important that we give students the skills they need to be able to reach tutoring, additional resources, just do their homework, explore concepts at the same pace that their more well-resourced counterparts might have. And so, you know, what we saw during the pandemic was, the early days of the pandemic, was that, you know, this sort of exacerbation of the digital divide. So we decided to drill down on exactly, you know, what does it take to address that. And so what we found, which probably isn't surprising to anybody here, is that you actually needed high-speed broadband internet service, and that you needed to have actual devices. So a mobile device was not going to be sufficient. Again, probably not news to anybody here, but it was important to actually put that down on paper for a lot of the federal policymakers. Next slide. And for the first time, as far as we could tell, we put together tech specs that actually looked at, what do you need to do to be able to get robust access? In the early days of the pandemic, we were just trying to cobble together anything. And so we were sort of seeing baseline speeds around 25.3. Yes, you can do something with that. But we found over time that the most sophisticated or the most sort of like useful applications were really the ones that allowed for two-way video. It was really about bringing other humans together, right? And so to do that with speed and data that's sufficient, you needed about 210 Mbps. And the reason we targeted that was because that met some of the current needs of some of the off-the-shelf technology that's available for education, but it also meets some of the current needs for some of the other essential uses outside of education. So in the healthcare context and for some government services as well. It also helps drive the ability of these institutions, whether educational institutions, government institutions, these institutions to start thinking about how they can plan long-term for how they want to support their use of technology, so that they can have reliable standards that they can then build on top of. And the device portion again is nothing too surprising. Having an actual new device that is set up for that's curriculum specific. So for some young learners, a lighter device can work. But if you're really looking to incentivize STEM careers and high school students, you probably want to have a little bit more of a robust device. So really having devices that can meet the needs of the student, and then also making sure that you don't have students that are equipped with devices that are breaking down on them frequently, because it just makes it that much harder to be able to support them. Again, nothing too surprising, but needed to be said. Next slide. We also put a number to what we saw as the persistent K-12 digital divide. Now, this is a number that we've estimated based on our research to try to understand, okay, what should the programs look like? How big do they need to be? And going forward, it's not like you get a laptop once and then boom, you're done. You're out of the digital divide forever. Obviously you're going to potentially need support ongoing. So we wanted to make sure that we came up with a persistent number that really gave policymakers an understanding of the scope of the problem. We also felt it was important for us to understand the size of the teacher digital divide. So not listed on this slide, but there are about 400,000 teachers in the digital divide as well. Next slide. What we also found was that there was no state that did not experience the K-12 digital divide. Even in states with the smallest numbers of students in the digital divide, 1 in 4 students still did not have an adequate internet connection or device. So that meant that at the federal level, at the very least, there was interest on all sides from all states to get something on the table to get this resolved. And I think that politically that was helpful, but also it was just so stark to see how far behind as a country we were. Next slide. And again, not surprising, disproportionate impacts on rural communities, Black and Latinx and Native American households. So one thing that I do think that was interesting was that we didn't find huge deltas between urban, suburban, and rural communities. There was some reason why students were in the digital divide, regardless of the type of community you're in. So if you're in an urban community, you may experience a combination of a lack of upgraded service or cost support needs. Suburban communities had similar problems. Rural communities had similar problems. So, in all cases, we saw a deep need. Again, I think this was, sad to see, but also politically useful to actually spur federal policymakers to take some action. Next slide. And we also gave them a number. We did a cost estimate of what it would take to actually purchase devices, deal with repairs and tech support, installation equipment, service fees. Now, this does not include the cost of reaching students who, do not have access at all, right? So building networks. But to the extent that we could put a price on the cost of closing the digital divide for kids who had some form of access, but were in the digital divide nevertheless, we wanted to make sure to put a number on that. And our understanding was about $6 to $11 billion. We were able to secure about $7 billion in the Emergency Connectivity Fund, in addition to other funds that came through CARES and other emergency services, or emergency funds. And we are still pushing to add annual funds to the ECF program and turn it into a permanent program, using ECF as shorthand for the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is the program that provides schools and libraries with funding for devices for students at home and connectivity as well. Next slide. And this probably was one of the more I think, influential pieces from our report for policymakers, just to sort of track through, what it means to have a disconnected student and how that impacts all of us through annual GDP loss and additional public costs. I think it started to kind of dawn on folks that yes, $7 billion seems like a lot of money, and annual funds around, $6 billion a year could be a lot of money, but then losing $22 to $33 billion a year seemed like a lot more money. Next slide. So, the good news is that, the federal government has invested incredible amounts of funding for broadband planning, long-term infrastructure investments, everything that you guys have been talking about and coming down the pike. So that's really exciting to see it's coming to fruition. And one of the things that we can do at Common Sense is, we're happy to help support planning and in the use of these funds, whether it's, helping make the case for making robust investments in infrastructure, or helping to understand how to do digital inclusion and digital divide planning work. Some of our key suggestions around digital needs assessments. That's something that schools started doing during the pandemic. We think it's a really great tool, not just for schools, but for other institutions that touch and concern populations in the digital divide. Broadband infrastructure upgrades. That to us is something that is, we kept on tripping over in talking to schools in different states who were putting together programs to close the digital divide in the early days of the pandemic, was that, they do one step forward with a program based on the infrastructure they had. And then they realized that it wasn't actually providing quality service that allowed students to effectively do any kind of digital curriculum. And so then you'd have to go back to the drawing board. So definitely, deployment is a really important piece of the puzzle. And then, lastly, I think it's important to note that right now we don't have a federal ECF as permanent. We don't have permanent funds to support schools and libraries to continue supporting students as they have with the ECF funds. It's going to be one-offs through programs, from industry partners or philanthropy. And I think it'll be really important to see if states are able to take advantage of some of the federal funding that's coming down the pike to be able to plug those gaps. Next slide. Drew?
Yeah. So this is just a little slide for you to help visualize current federal support for Arizona. It's broken down by program that's active right now and the impact it's having. So the first, Mina was just talking about the orange one, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which in Arizona, that is currently funding about 300,000 devices and about 60,000 connections. And that funding will end on June 30th this year. So it's unclear what's going to happen to the students that program is currently connecting. And that those students are some of our largest priority at Common Sense. There's also the Affordable Connectivity Program, which we've been talking about currently in Arizona. That's about 200,000 households. About 23% of the eligible population is currently connected. So there's a huge opportunity to expand people on the ACA through outreach. And there will be an opportunity from the FCC to get grant money to do just that sort of outreach. Recently, some rules came out for the American Rescue Plan Act Capital Projects Fund. Every state will get at least $100 million from this fund. Oh, Arizona, I have the allocation. $190 million for Arizona. 5% of it is available now to start working on planning. So the state can apply for that money and use a big chunk of it to reach out to communities and to start their plan for how they're going to use that batch of money. As you all already know, there's the ARPA state recovery funds. I believe 100 million of that was taken and put into the Arizona state grant program. That has a lot of, that's very flexible. You can use that anywhere, almost. There aren't speed requirements. So as long as you can demonstrate need, perhaps by using school digital needs assessments or any other planning, you can use that Treasury funds. And then below it, you can see that counties have received about 1.5 billion and cities have received about 100 million. And there below them are the individual breakdowns. But all that money that each county, city, and the state has received can be used for broadband projects. And it has pretty flexible restrictions. So if you know someone who has some authority over those funds, they're a good person to talk to and to propose your project. And then one last thing I want to show, Elena, if you can stop sharing and I will take over. I'm just going to show a couple resources we have recently released to help you. 1 second. Share. Okay, can you see that? Wait, no, share. Can you see, Amina, can you see the primer?
No.
No, okay.
Here, let me see. You want me to see if I can pull it up?
I should be able to get it right here, hopefully. Now?
Yep.
Okay. So we've released our primer on policies. There are links to this in our presentation and I'll share them around. But these just have ideas for states and localities for how they can best maximize all the federal funding that they're getting right now. Because this, as everyone knows, is a once in a generational opportunity. And it's really important to invest this in infrastructure that's going to last for a long time. Because like Amina said, we're going to be using this. If a kid doesn't have quality access to the internet, I think we can all agree that's really going to hurt their education. So we want to make sure all kids have it. So this is our primer. And then we also have this, which is our federal funding guide to all the different broadband opportunities right now. It has a program name, the allocation amount, how it's being allocated, deadlines, recipients, and uses, and then some links to further reading. But hopefully, if you are like me, confused by all the available opportunities for broadband funding, this might help you organize some of that information. And I know we're at time now, so I will wrap here. And I think I saw a question earlier as well that I will, something about eligibility.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if that was about the ACP program, the Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ECF program, but I just put some information down in the chat about both.
Okay,
thank you.
You guys real quick. The urban, suburban, rural all being the same is a bit of a head scratcher for me. I'd love to see that research.
Sure.
I found that most rural, there's literally no infrastructure. I was curious if you guys looked at the Tulsa Response Program. I found that to be one of the more effective programs. They took CARES Act money, and it seems like a million years ago. And this is the summer of 2020. And they were able to hook up, I believe it was 22,000 low-income families over the summer in the beginning of the pandemic when everyone was running around with their hair on fire. And what they did was they worked with the existing providers, in that case, Cox and AT&T. They didn't build it themselves. And I'm curious if you guys have looked at programs where states, cities, counties have worked with existing providers versus build it themselves, and the success rate of both.
Yeah. So, and Drew, maybe I'll ask you to send our second report. So we did our second report was case studies. Now, granted, this is case studies, like it came out, in the fall of 2020. So it's, it was just at the beginning of taking advantage of some of the funding that came out there. And really our goal was to just try and see what schools are gravitating towards doing and what was working best for them. So yes, the example that you're giving, I don't know that one in particular, but I know of many others across the country that did similar things, right? Where they did a digital needs assessment and kind of starts there. It starts with a digital needs assessment done at the school level. The incredible advantage of making sure that your schools are doing a digital needs assessment is that you have a population where you're actually able to do needs assessments already. And when I say needs, I don't mean, grades or, anything like that. I mean, do you have access? Do you need, what level of access do you have? Potentially even asking them about the cost of service that they're encountering. What are your digital inclusion needs at home? What languages do you speak? Do your caregivers need support for digital inclusion? So, you have a much better picture, and then devices, of course. And you're able to, especially if you've got either state policies or federal policies that ask for these types of fields with for data retention, student information system providers, those vendors would be able to automatically add those fields to sort of the suite of fields that are available to schools. And if it's required by the state or the federal government, or even suggested, those are often free then. So there's a way to do the data gathering with an institution that's, really robust. And then you've got it down to the address. That's just incredible amounts of data for anybody who's doing broadband work that you wouldn't normally have, right? Like you got about 55 million, 51 million students across the United States. With the needs assessments, if you overlay that, North Dakota did this, I think in California, we saw some of this. If you overlay that with partnerships with your existing providers within your district, they're able to sort of say very quickly who they serve and who they aren't able to serve because of where their footprint is. And then what schools were able to do is that they became sort of like the super subscriber, where they purchased broadband service based on the needs of their students, their geographic locations, and the mapped like providers on top. I mean, this is incredible work being done by schools. Like broadband should not be their number one priority. But yeah, they were able to do that. So that was sort of the model we saw.
One of the ideas that we're looking at, I don't know if you're familiar with a group called Information Superhighway. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at, because again, when you're asking students, do you have broadband, or even parents, and particularly in a culturally appropriate environment, you're not always getting the accurate answer. In many cases, you're getting, people have pride, and I totally understand that. Looking at actually what services available are at what addresses, physically from the carriers and the student data, cross-referencing that in an anonymous way so it's compliant with state rules, and then basing your policy on that, as opposed to, I hate to use the word hearsay, but just, feelings and what people think. Because I think there are some holes here in the Phoenix area. I know Paul and the folks at Phoenix College are addressing some of that, but just trying to get a very accurate picture of that. And so I'm anxious to read a little bit more about what you guys have found. And you guys have been doing this for a very long time, and we certainly can use all the help we can get, but just make sure that we come up with programs that define the actual program. I was on a call Friday, and somebody had this Steve Jobs quote, which I wrote down. It was so good. It said, if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. And I think you guys have done a really good job of defining the problem here. So keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, and Education Superhighway is a group that we actually partnered with alongside Boston Consulting Group for our second report. So hopefully, Drew, did you put it up there? I don't know if you, yeah.
Yep, second report's in the chat. That
Yeah.
has the case studies Amina was talking about.
So that has our state by state case studies. You know, we didn't do every state, but we tried to kind of push out as far as we could in those early days of the pandemic. Really interesting stories from Texas in terms of they had like a multi-phase effort through their Department of Ed. Really interesting stories from like small towns like San Rafael in California, which is actually a pretty affluent town. But then of course they had this concentrated pocket of families who were completely unconnected. So, you know, because there were parts of the community that hadn't been served, even though this was like on paper, very well-served community, exactly where the low-income students lived, was the place where you didn't have connectivity. So that's some of this, like, when you start to ask, like, where are unconnected kids, they all kind of look the same, because even in urban areas, you can have these sort of like unupgraded or truly unconnected pockets. And then all of a sudden, you might as well be in a very like rural area, because it doesn't make a difference that you've got connectivity a block away. But anyhow, there's some really good case studies in there, and happy to circle back with anyone that's interested in talking about this more.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, getting accurate data is so important. I can't stress that enough. So thanks.
I think Paul had a question.
Yes, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, just two things quickly, because we're going to run to another meeting. There's certainly a lot of really good data out there, and I would agree that once you start digging down into the data, the census tract down to the census block, then you really start to find those pockets within areas that really are impoverished in terms of internet connections. But also look at the poverty statistics as well. That's an area that's often overlooked. But when you dig into that, for some of the school districts, even here in Central Phoenix, we've got kids between the ages of 5 and 17, where in some districts, 30% of the students are in poverty. And those numbers exist. But the other piece too, that when it comes to assessing the need for broadband, when I see, like in your report, you put 200/10, right? There's a lot of people who actually manage to get a lot of things to work on speeds substantially lower with multiple people. So I'm a little hesitant sometimes when I see some of these numbers that are put out there, because it's a flag to policymakers, yet most folks, and I'll put up myself, my own family, we don't have anywhere near that type of speed at home, but we're making things work, and things work pretty well. You know, we can watch a few different streaming channels and video conferences at the same time. So it's just one of those things that when numbers like that do come out to policymakers, sometimes it also can exclude different types of technology, and it also can ramp up sometimes unwarranted concerns. But we do need to increase our bandwidth. I would agree on that. But it's an interesting dilemma that we're in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think our, you know, to get that number, we kicked the tires with, you know, EdTech companies, Khan Academy, ISPs, and Department of Ed. So, you know, we were trying to basically get a number that actually represented what both EdTech platforms, ISPs, and educators were seeing as like an ideal. Because what we didn't want to have happen is, I mean, like, folks in education already make do with very little. We wanted to make sure whatever came out was actually trying to hit that ideal and that robust mark. And then, you know, would be prepared for the future as well. But certainly in certain areas and certain geographic locations, you're going to have to come up with other alternatives, and that's completely understood. And I hear you on that one too.
Okay, so a couple of quick things, because we're past time already. So Joy, I think you have your hand up. Did you have something?
Yes, I'm sorry, just really quickly, I know we're out of time. I believe that the ADE's most recent survey that they sent out is trying to gather the data, exactly what you're talking about. I am very, very interested in getting this presentation. I don't know, Steve, if you're going to get it and hand it out to everyone, if we have access to it, if they're willing to give us these data numbers. And again, Apache County has applied for some grants, and I hope we're looking good. But the implementation, even after the infrastructure gets built, there's a long way to go after the fact. And what I've seen that you've presented so far is very, very interesting to me. I would love to have a sidebar conversation, get your contact information, because including teachers in the data, I just feel like some of the stuff that you presented just feels more solution-based. There's information for information's sake, and then there's information for solution's sake. And I'm very interested in this, and I just wanted to put that out there. I would really love to talk to you, and I agree with Jeff. The data has to be driven towards solution-based. And I appreciate everything you've done. I can't believe we haven't had this presentation before, Steve. This is so great.
Well, thanks. We'll definitely connect offline. I think we are sharing the slides. I did want to just note for folks on this call, we are putting together another sort of slate of research. Our hope is that this will be supportive for state broadband plans. I know every state's in a different place. So, it can't be one size fits all, but our goal is to help drive sort of these essential uses like education and healthcare, et cetera. So to the extent there are any ideas or thoughts on what's the kind of data you'd like to see, please do reach out to us.
So we do need to end for now, although we will continue with kibitzing for any of you who want to continue to have some conversation. I do want to make sure, Elena, a couple of things. One is that any of the presentation, the documents that you guys shared, if you can get those to me ASAP, and we'll be sending out the summary of the meeting probably tomorrow morning, but would like to be able to share any of those documents. So, and also there is, and I'm going to leave it open for a little bit, in the chat, people have posted some documents, and you can download those documents while the chat is open. So I encourage you to do that. As a matter of fact, you can also save the chat if you so choose. Of course, we'll share the chat with you, but any of those kinds of things. And then Elena and Drew in particular, and Amina, we really need to have a conversation about what's next for us and you guys and how we best coordinate with you. This was really informative for me, and I think for a lot of the folks who were online today.
Steve, yeah, we'll definitely follow up and circle back on a number of these questions and set up some meetings with these folks. And I am about to hit send on the link to the presentation for you.
Sounds great. Okay, any other quick questions? If not, I'm going to stop recording